Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Hi, Sarah.
Hey,
How are
sorry
you?
for the delay.
That's
Good?
okay. Sorry, everyone, for the delay. So we have a few people joining. I think we're waiting for a couple more folks to join, and then we'll get started. Um, but I'll introduce myself, and then we can kind of start the conversation. So my name is Fatima Musa, and I'm a board member of SMILE. And SMILE is an organization that works with children and youth with disabilities in the Greater Toronto Area. And we're excited because we're going to be talking to Sarah Jama today. So Sarah is a co-founder of the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, and we're going to be chatting with her for Black History Month because we're celebrating some of our leaders and change makers in the community. So Sarah, I think you are on. Can you hear me?
I think my thing froze. I'm so bad at Instagram. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
But I
Hopefully
think my thing froze. Is it frozen for you?
it's frozen. It's showing that it's loading, but I think I can hear you fine. So
Okay.
yeah, so we'll just keep going until it starts up again.
I'm actually
Um,
so bad at Instagram. This is my first live thing ever. Like I don't even have Snapchat, so that's cool. Thank
yeah,
you for having me.
no problem. And this is also my first Instagram live. So I'm not Cardi B. I'm gonna try to channel a little bit in this conversation. But we'll do our best. And if anybody on the live has tips for us, they can, please do let us know if you have any tips. Um, so I guess we'll get started. I'm super excited to be talking to you because I'm also a bit of a fan. I follow you on Twitter. I think,
Oh man, I'm a fan
yeah,
of you.
thanks.
Somali sisters, do it up.
Yes. So I follow some of the cool things that you're doing in the community. You're definitely politically active, and you're also a great advocate. So I'm excited to talk with you today. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do. Share your brilliance with the people on live.
That's so nice. My name's Sarah Jama. I am one of the co-founders of an organization called the Disability Justice Network of Ontario.
Mhm.
We are made up of three co-founders. We have a youth council, we have a research committee, an advocacy committee,
Mhm.
and an education committee. And our purpose is to create a world where people with disabilities are free to be. And what that looks like to us is creating a world where people with disabilities are being like included in society in a way that is around building capacity. So not just creating a world where we have legislation that says people with disabilities are of economic benefit to society, which is how a lot of our legal rights are framed, but saying that no, we actually are a body of people who have the fundamental right to exist. We're going to politically push for the change that we want to see. We're organizers, we're activists, and the fact that we have the right to exist whether or not we can fit this idea of being productive,
Yeah.
right? Whether or not we can hold a job. No
Mhm.
matter who you are, you have the right to be here. And so we're organizing to basically say we want access to housing. We
Yeah.
want to be able to create a world where people with disabilities are sexually assaulted. We
Mhm.
want to create a world where there's prison justice for people with disabilities,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and where we're included in education. So these are all the things that we're sort of focusing on right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we're doing a collab with Smile Canada in terms of highlighting local Black people from across Ontario with disabilities who are doing good work.
Awesome. And so for your organization, are you based in Hamilton?
Yeah, so we picked Hamilton as our home base
Mhm.
because Hamilton has the. Am I still frozen?
I think you are for me.
This is ridiculous. Okay. Uh,
We'll
yeah.
try and see if it ends up showing up.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the Disability Justice Network of Ontario is focused on Hamilton right now just because Hamilton has the largest density of people with disabilities across the province.
Okay.
But our youth council members are made up of half from Hamilton and half from across the province, and we're hoping to build the capacity within the next couple of years to expand across Ontario, but we really believe in the idea of working like where we're at. It'll be hard to do like local advocacy and build capacity in Toronto if like we're in Hamilton. So we're hoping to expand, but right now we are here in Hamilton locally. But that being said, we do tend to weigh in on provincial and federal issues as they come up, and we're focused on highlighting the voices of those who are the most marginalized within the disability community, which looks like if you're racialized, queer, trans, and your voice is not being heard, you can still participate, especially in DJNO if that appeals to you, no matter where you are, because we don't want to create more barriers in our work if we're trying to be inclusive.
Absolutely. So just to kind of introduce yourself again to the people online who are joining. So we're in a conversation with Sarah Jama, and if you have any questions, please ask them in the comments below, and we'll also address them during our conversation. So,
this is so cool. I can see who's on the thing.
Yeah, you can see who's on the thing. You can say hi if you want. So I want to ask you, how did you get involved in advocacy work?
That's a good question. I think I've always kind of been an advocate. I would like credit a lot of it to my mom. So my mom's someone who, like, she was new to Canada, got involved, like, sort of just got thrown into disability justice sort of work, and being an advocate in the sense that she didn't really have a choice, right? She had to figure out how to navigate, you know, the welfare state, the healthcare system, the education system, and figure out a way for me to be included and for my voice to be heard. So that started like really young. So for her, that meant making sure wherever possible, I would always feel free to speak my mind. So when Somali aunties would come up and say like, "Mahakakutai, what happened to your daughter? Like, what's wrong with her legs?" She would be like, "She's standing right there. You can ask her yourself." And so at 4 years old, I'd have to like figure out how to articulate what I felt my disability meant to me and how it impacted me. Sometimes for kids at school, that meant I would make up stories. I was abducted by aliens, you know, but sometimes that meant I would explain what cerebral palsy meant for me in the moment. Like I had complete autonomy over how I wanted to be represented and what it meant to me. And so I think I've always carried that with me. But moving through school and through life, I realized that there were systems in place that were built not for me. No matter how much I would try to speak up, I felt like I was equal to everybody else. That just wasn't the case, and that was really manifest.
So, just to kind of introduce yourself again to the people online who are joining. So we're in a conversation with Sarah Jama, and if you have any questions, please ask them in the comments below, and we'll also address them during our conversation. So,
this is so cool. I can see who's on the thing.
Yeah, you can see who's on the thing. You can say hi if you want. So I want to ask you, how did you get involved in advocacy work?
That's a good question. I think I've always kind of been an advocate. I would like credit a lot of it to my mom. So my mom's someone who, like, she was new to Canada, got involved, like, sort of just got thrown into disability justice sort of work, and being an advocate in the sense that she didn't really have a choice, right? She had to figure out how to navigate, you know, the welfare state, the healthcare system, the education system, and figure out a way for me to be included and for my voice to be heard. So that started like really young. So for her, that meant making sure wherever possible, I would always feel free to speak my mind. So when Somali aunties would come up and say like, "Mahakakutai, what happened to your daughter? Like, what's wrong with her legs?" She would be like, "She's standing right there. You can ask her yourself." And so at 4 years old, I'd have to like figure out how to articulate what I felt my disability meant to me and how it impacted me. Sometimes for kids at school, that meant I would make up stories. I was abducted by aliens, you know, but sometimes that meant I would explain what cerebral palsy meant for me in the moment. Like I had complete autonomy over how I wanted to be represented and what it meant to me. And so I think I've always carried that with me. But moving through school and through life, I realized that there were systems in place that were built not for me. No matter how much I would try to speak up and
Mm-hmm.
felt like I was equal to everybody else, that just wasn't the case. And that was really manifested in, you know, when I would be bullied and teachers would say, that's not really happening. I know the kid you're talking about, he would never do something like that. He would never call you that. He would never say those racist or ableist things.
Mm-hmm.
And then also teachers who would say I would never make it to university. Teachers who forcibly enrolled me into classes with for kids with autism because they didn't understand the diversity in the disability community,
Mm-hmm.
right? Teachers who would always question my intellect, made me question whether or not I was sane, forced me to go to therapy because I was making up the fact that I was being bullied. Made me question like my right to exist as a person to the point where you almost don't want to exist in these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And then in I would say grade 12, that all kind of shifted because I really internalized it. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I was like, I'm just going to do what I'm doing. Who cares? This is the way it is. But then a kid in grade 9, his name was George, that I met. He told me how he had wanted to go to a Etobicoke School of the Arts,
Mm-hmm.
and how the school wasn't accessible. So he didn't apply even though he was wanting to be an actor. And for me, that was like, I remember getting so mad and looking at all that I've been through. I don't know why this was the thing that made me the most mad, but it was because for me, I realized at that point what systemic injustice was. Like an entire system, an entire school, preventing this kid from not being able to achieve his dream and become an actor. So I got mad. I got on a bus. I went to go try to figure out how to delegate in front of the Special Education Advisory Committee at the TDSB for the first time ever. I had no idea what I was doing, fam. I rolled in, and I was like, I'm going to speak to this thing. And I still remember to this day, the chair of that committee, Chris Bolton, laughed in my face, and he asked me the question, who do you think you are? To come in here with no speaking rights, like, you're not on any agenda. Like, where did you come from? Who do you represent? Who are you?
Yeah.
And I was so angry because to me it was the manifestation of everything to do with the problem around power and how we view power, right? All these parents of people with disabilities, not with really any lived experience themselves, sitting around a table, predominantly white men, telling me that I did not have the right to advocate toward, you know, something that directly affected people like me.
Yeah.
Right? And so from that moment on, I was like, if that ever happened again, I would speak up, no matter how scary or how intense it was. And then at McMaster, I joined a radical group. I learned about intersectionality, all these language and terms that I didn't know academically, but I understood through experience, and I was able to put that into context and like learn about how to occupy space and make my voice heard. And so I think now that's manifesting into political activism and organizing, but also learning how to build and share power amongst other people with disabilities who felt similarly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's kind of like how I started in this way and why I'm here.
Yeah. Wow, what an amazing journey, Sarah. And I think that, you know, just being like continuing on to advocate for others in a way to kind of move forward. I think that's so amazing. So thank you for the work that you're doing and continue to do.
Thank you for the work that you're doing as well. It's important.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, and I know you talked a little bit about this in terms of your journey, but kind of moving forward as you continue on, what advice would you give to children and youth who are Black and have disabilities and are moving through, you know, the world today as it is with all the different obstacles that we have to face, you know, with those coupled identities together, like you said, having an intersectional lens on that?
I think we're living in dangerous, like, and ambiguous times. Like, it feels like I get up every day and there's a new announcement in terms of, like, people's right to exist as people with disabilities. And what scares me even more is a lot of the narratives and the language and the faces that are shown when we're talking about the hardships around healthcare are white faces. It's as though we don't exist. People of color with disabilities don't exist right now, right? There's not a lot of voices being shared. from diverse communities of people with disabilities. And like, so I would give a lot of advice, but the two main things I would say is, number one, like learn about the history of disability organizing in Ontario, in Canada, and across the world, and in the global south. Like, there's a lot of work being done by people who aren't just upholding white supremacist systems. There's a lot of work being done by queer, racialized, marginalized communities, like looking at Sins Invalid, like the fact that it was a arts collective of Black and disabled queer people who created the terminology around what it means to use a disability justice framework, right? So learn your history, learn that though the system will tell you your barriers should be individualized and that it's about accommodations and access, it's more than that. It's about a community of people being told again and again through various systems that you don't have the right to exist, and I would say you do. So number one, learn the history so that you don't feel as isolated. Number two, I would say, I think we live in dangerous times too, because a lot of the narratives around like the Ford government is around business, right, and capital and productivity, and like even his argument around the 15 and fairness campaign, saying that, you know, a $15 minimum wage would hurt people with disabilities because they would be the first to be fired. That's a false argument. I would say don't believe the narratives that we need to fit standard, you know, standard conversations around what it means to be productive in order to have a right to exist. Like, that's inherently a capitalist and dangerous and violent framework, right? Especially for people with disabilities who can't work. Your worth is not tied to your ability to produce in the systems that are trying to kill us in the first place. So that's another piece of advice I would give. And I think those two things, understanding those two things, your history and the fact that your worth is not tied to what you produce inherently, is the framework, the psychological work that people with disabilities need to do before we even get to the point of like activism, because activism and organizing this work is hard, it's dangerous, it's sad, it's depressing, but like what people don't talk about. And I was talking with like the co-founder of DJNO, Shante, yesterday about like France Fanon, and like how he talks a lot about like the psychological work that Black people have to do around just being able to exist. Like, I would say that work is doubly so when you're Black and disabled, because in so many different ways you're being told again and again that you don't have the right to exist in these spaces. And I think just doing that psychological work is the first step, because it's not written in any academic books. It doesn't exist. All of us who exist right now as people of color with disabilities are trying to navigate this world and understanding this without the support of academia, just like collective sharing our stories and like just trying to figure it out as we go along. And yet the burden is on us to advocate and to try to make that change. And so take that time to build your community locally, understand your history and where this comes from, this work, and also understand that, you know, your worth is not tied to your ability to produce. And then I would say all the activism and stuff will come naturally after that.
That's some amazing advice. So I want to go to some of the questions that were posed. And I know your video is still frozen.
Sorry, should I like exit? There's an X.
Yeah, so if you press that, see, and then try and come back and see if it works.
Okay.
Okay.
Did it work? Hi.
Yes.
Okay, it worked.
Hi, I can see you now. Okay, awesome.
Okay, cool.
So you're back with us. We had a question. I'm just scrolling up here. So from Cataract Attack.
Hi, Kathleen.
So Kathleen asks, how did the barriers in education shape how you view institutions? And they mentioned post-secondary specific.
Kathleen, you know the answer to this. Okay, post-secondary specific. I think for me, like, so the next part of the story would be that, and some people know this already, but so I had an incident where my math class in first year wasn't accessible, and I was paying for the class because I thought I wanted to be a psychologist. That's actually really hard to do, so I didn't end up doing that. But I needed this math class at that time to do what I thought I wanted to do, and the class wasn't accessible, and so I did what I was told to do. I went to Student Accessibility Services, and they were like, yeah, cool, we'll move the classroom or whatever, but that took some time. And then I remember emailing the Vice President of Education of the student union, because I was like, maybe they're my representative, they'll help. They didn't respond, so I was pretty mad. And then the teacher came back to SAS and was like, oh, I've taught in this room for years, I'm not going to switch my class.
Yeah.
And then he even put like a sign up on the door saying the class is staying here, even though SAS emailed everybody saying the class moved. So he was wild, and like he really did not, he believed fundamentally that I shouldn't have been in the class if it was a problem, because it was easier for him. So I got really, really mad.
Yeah.
Eventually it got sorted after 2 weeks, but like I'm bad at math. I needed to be in class. So I was like really mad, and I was just like, what can I do if the systems in place don't work for me? Because in high school, you're not taught self-advocacy. You're taught to go to student accessibility services or services that are in place to support you. You're not taught how to build services, how to critique services, only that the services are there. So what do you do when they don't work? Do you shrivel up and die? So I like decided like, okay, I'm gonna try to run for a spot on this thing called the Student Representative Assembly. My VP Education didn't respond, so screw it, I'm gonna do it myself. So I ran, and I basically ranted at a bunch of class talks. I got elected by the skin of my teeth. Wow. I don't know how it happened, because I had no idea. My mom helped me put up posters and everything, and then got elected. But even in student council, like even doing all that, what I saw was a reflection of, you know, what I mentioned earlier with the Special Education Advisory Committee of the TDSB. It was a bunch of kids from privileged backgrounds who said they cared about equity and inclusion and all these issues, but when it came down to actually hearing from people with lived experience, the response I would get back was, oh, you're not using the right language. Oh, that's not how the process goes. Oh, you don't understand bureaucracy. And so it was really frustrating coming from like having no political understanding, having to like navigate, learning how to do this, like representing what I thought was my community of people who came from disenfranchised backgrounds. And like sitting in this space with like rich, mostly rich, young students who cared about equity on paper but didn't really understand how that manifested in person. And at the end of all that, I was reelected or whatever, and then by the end of my term on this thing called the Student Representative Assembly, one thing that really resonated with me as I left was I was like titled something really tropey. I think it was like the most, it was like, I'm trying to remember the terminology they used, the most dramatic council member or something like that. They gave out these weird awards as a joke. And like, after all that time, I was just like, I didn't really have any faith in terms of like these systems working for people with disabilities. But something cool that I realized after was that change happens slowly and over time. So I wanted things to happen really, really quickly. And I think change did happen. It just happened a little bit after I left. So like the Maxess, the service for students with disabilities, was created and it's still running, and it's run by students with disabilities, and there's work being done. So I've learned from all that, just to going back to Kathleen's question of like, what have you learned, or how did your post-secondary experience impact what you're doing now? I've really learned this concept of like change takes time, and like it feels urgent, especially for people with lived experience. It felt urgent for me. It feels urgent now, knowing that I just recently got off of social assistance and I'm employed now and I'm lucky. But these changes, that the attacks on people with disabilities, the attacks of the community, like on the communities that I represent from people in positions of power, even when it was on just student council level, everything felt super urgent. And like, I'm learning now that change takes time.
That's an important lesson, like change taking time. And I think that, you know, when you're talking about knowing your history, people who might think they practice principles of equity and inclusion, knowing your history is super important in order to be able to do that, right? And you know, it would be interesting to hear like what your kind of reflections are in terms of how to, in addition to knowing your history, how do people actually, need to know how to walk the walk and talk, like not just like talk it, right? Because it's,
Mm-hmm.
as a Black woman and Somali Muslim, like, yes, it's like we live it, right? And
Yeah.
as a woman with disabilities on top of that, like you're living that experience, right? But for people who want to support, how do they go about doing that without just saying the word?
You literally have to do the hard work of just making space.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a case study. Look, for example, the stuff happening around, like, the advocacy around the funding for kids with autism.
Mm-hmm.
I posed the question, and I posed it last week when I got on a call with a bunch of advocates, like, why are the dominant voices in the media right now parents of people like with autism, and why is it so centered around white voices?
Mm-hmm.
And the response I got was, well, you don't understand. Well, these kids are not able to advocate for themselves. And I think that is a slap in the face. And it's the exact language that was used to fundamentally institutionalize mass amounts of people in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you were born with autism, like, in the early 60s, 50s, you would have been institutionalized because legally, like, there were laws in place that said you were not fundamentally able to take care of yourself. We had the Aurelia Asylum for Idiots, we had the Rusty McDonald School of the Blind, we had a bunch of institutions that were set up across the country for people with disabilities to keep them separate from society. And this is the language, the same language that was used and is being wielded by parents in this conversation of we need to protect kids with autism. And it's not that I'm saying the work that they're doing is bad, but I'm saying if we don't use this time as an opportunity to change the rhetoric and to elevate the voices of people who identify as autistic in this movement building and in the change they're trying to make, then who are we doing this for and why?
Yeah.
So that's just an example. Learn when to pass the mic as allies, right? Also understand that some of the leading cause of disability in Canada is old age. Like, the work that we are doing as a disability justice movement is the work that I believe helps to underpin and support and create the foundation for all other movement building, right? People with disabilities fit in every race, religion, geographic location. Literally, we are the largest minority, or whatever terminology you want to use, that exists, and it will continue to grow. We will continue to grow. And I think once we figure out how to create a society where people with disabilities can fully and freely exist, which also means not creating a society that is so focused on productivity, we will be one step closer to a revolution. That means our work is tied to the work of Black Lives Matter. That means our work is tied to the work of Indigenous resistance. That means our work is tied to the liberation of queer and trans and LGBTQ plus people. Understanding that how all these causes are interconnected. And the disability justice movement is so new in Canada. We are so behind. So understanding that Canada just recently tabled legislation to say federally that we have the right to exist, when America, which shouldn't be elevated at all, has had a federal accessibility act for what, almost 20 years? Why are we so behind in pushing for this idea that people with disabilities have the right to exist freely? I think that's because people with disabilities are dangerous to the state. Like, once we learn how to organize freely, because we're such a mass group of people, like, and once we become a actual politicized group again, like we were back when the I guess, like, what people don't talk about is like such the links between these different groups, like how, for example, Black Lives Matter was interconnected with disability rights movements in the States, right? How one of the the Black Panthers and one of their founders were actually the creators of a center for independent living in Oakland, and how all of these movements are so interconnected. Once we realize how to organize effectively as a mass group of people, in whatever way, whether it's not like online or in person, in whatever way works, I think we actually will become a fundamental and dangerous group to all the systems that continuously say people who are different don't have the right to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once we get over this idea that we have to do movement building and issue-based work in silos and start working together, we'll be one step closer to achieving a world where all of us have the right to exist freely. And so I think back to your question of like, how do you do this work in a way that is effective and not just theoretical? Like, a very basic way is to understand how all of these movements are connected and to understand that you need to pass the mic. It's not enough to be a parent. It's not enough to be an ally. Like, literally create space for people with disabilities to have their voice elevated. And I don't mean, I'm so tired. It's always just like people keep coming up to me to ask me to speak. I don't do this work because I want to be able to speak. Like, there's so many other people with disabilities to tap on the shoulder, like Kylie Brooks, who is a fantastic writer, trans disability justice activist, like spoke at our keynote launch for DJNO in September, and she almost like, she never gets asked to speak. And I think like a lot of organizations like to ask people who are palatable. What I mean by palatable is like, I can communicate easily, right? Or like in a way that's easy for people in organizations to understand. I don't require ASL. I don't require an assistive community device. Understanding that there is privilege too in the disability community, and that translates into the voices in terms of who is elevated and who's not. It's not enough to elevate David Lepofsky's voice just because he did work around IOTA. Like, there are other people to tap on the shoulder, and once we start learning to not just tap the same people over and over again to speak it for things, and start finding other people who are doing good work, even if it means more work on the part of the organizer to do that work, like, it's part of disability justice. So another way we can create space is like not continuously tapping on the shoulders of those who continue to speak in this movement, but finding and supporting other voices too. Because it's not just me, and it's not just DJNO, and it's not just David Lepofsky, and the fact that I can name maybe 10 people off of the top of my head only, when there are maybe hundreds, thousands of people that we could talk to who are doing this work on a small local level, or just on an individual daily level to be able to survive. Like, that's not enough. Sorry, I talk so much.
No, you're speaking facts, Sarah, and I'm so happy that you're just like, you're catching us. You're catching us on, you know, what we need to be doing more. So I thank you for that. I want to go to see if there's any questions from the participants. So I think we had one question from Fatima. So we may have touched on this already, but whether you have any advice for others on how to support individuals with disabilities. So whether they be service providers, family members, friends, how can others who are in the communities of folks with disabilities support their loved ones or their friends, their families, significant others?
I think, there's so much that can be done. But yeah, like elevating the voices of people with disabilities versus trying to speak for them, especially parents. Like, I know parents are so emotionally attached to their kids, and I know everybody communicates differently and needs different supports, but we need to get into the practice of just elevating as much as possible the voices of people with disabilities versus speaking for them. I think another thing that can be done, like very typical stuff, is make sure to always put an accessibility line in your budget when you're organizing. It's not enough to say that you're woke or that you care. You have to have it in your budget, right? The fact that it's so hard to include people with disabilities in different organizing spaces is a testament to how important it is for any sort of revolution to exist, right? The fact that this is the only sort of space or movement that requires actual capitalist, like funds, like money, like tangible money to be put into it to be able to make spaces accessible, which means having PSW available at events, having ASL interpreters. That is a necessity, right? If you're going to say that you're inclusive. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect. Like, understand that everybody has room to grow and to change. And I'm learning a lot about access needs that are not my own. understand, what's another piece of advice? I hate how people with disabilities are so like, I'm trying to figure out how to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, like I talk a lot about this with Shantia, the other co-founder for DJNO. It's almost like people with disabilities have to learn a new kind of code switching.
Yeah.
Like, so for me, it's like I'm so good at just like smiling in the moment when people come and ask me random questions about who I am or why I'm in a chair or what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it makes me the perfect, because I've had to learn to just like code switch, like learn when somebody's being racist, ableist, how to navigate all these different spaces.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me so good at being able to just respond and do that labor. But I think as allies, we need to be able to like learn to do that labor more, if that makes sense. So just learning to unpack or to step in when you see uncomfortable situations happening. So that we can exist freely and not have to perform so much. Because I literally have to do that all the time. And I don't know, it's something like France Fanon talks about a lot. Apparently that's what Shantia was saying. I don't read a lot. But I would like to see some sort of study done, maybe one day in the future, around the psychology behind what it means to be Black and disabled, right? And racialized, and go through these systems. I also like start thinking a lot of people with disabilities have family and friends that are still stuck in the 90s. Like, we're still talking about access and inclusion. Like, I don't care about getting access to a store so I can buy something. But that's like the language. Or I don't care about only just finding a job, because I know that jobs are shitty anyway. Like, things are getting worse and worse. I care about accessible and affordable housing. I care about like education systems that aren't telling us that we are burdens on society. I care about, the fact that people are literally being killed because they're racialized and disabled, and like their bodies are weaponized, like Abdurrahman Abdi, like Jermaine Carby, like Andrew Loku, like Salman Fakiri, who was a Muslim man with schizophrenia who was killed. Like, people are literally dying. So the rhetoric needs to change from, my kid needs to be able to do this and this and this and this and have an IEP. Like, okay, literally after this person is a child, what is it going to look like for them to exist in this world as an adult? We put so much energy into children, which is good. Alhamdulillah, that's good. Like, people need that. But also understand that people with disabilities grow up, like children grow up. And we want to create a world that is safe and free for them to exist too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have a couple of questions coming in. Sai is asking, or says that, Sarah, you're also mentoring a lot of young organizations in our community. So how do you find time to mentor so many organizations, such as Never Gonna
Shout out to Never Gonna Stop. Yeah, I'm kidding.
And King Sai also says, how can organizations make events more accessible for people with disabilities, which I think you talked about a little bit, but do you want to speak to that?
I think, like, to answer Sai's first question, I'm so glad you're on this. That's so dope. Hi, Sai. I think, like, I see all of our issues as interconnected, right? Never Gonna Stop is a group of young Black people in Hamilton who are trying to create a space to say that, you know what, no matter what we're going through, we're never going to stop being who we are. And they ran two of the most successful events I've ever seen for Black youth. Like, they filled a basketball stadium with like 500 Black youth in Hamilton. They just did a Black History Month event that had hundreds of people, all Black youth as well. I see all of our issues as interconnected, which is why, like, I'm trying to figure out how to not just elevate my own voice, but learning how to support other people and doing that too, which is complicated because I don't know everything, so I'm learning as I go along too, but it's been a lot of fun. I think in terms of making events accessible, it requires making a budget line specifically for accessibility, which most organizations, and I've struggled with that too sometimes, most organizations don't do. It's just not in practice, but you never know who's going to come out to your events, and so there always needs to be a pocket of money set aside to make sure. And also, like, as much as possible, including people with disabilities in the actual organizing will help you figure out, okay, what are needs that exist that I'm not thinking about.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And asking those questions constantly, like always having that on you.
Legit.
For sure.
They also, okay, I'm going to do a shout out. They did like a huge fundraiser for sickle cell in Hamilton too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear the community in Hamilton's like mobilized so greatly. So really awesome. So I had a question for you as well. Who are Black leaders and change makers that inspire you?
There's so many. Like literally all of BLM Toronto, like Sandy Hudson, Pascal, Rodney, Brittany Mofu's really cool. Matthew Green is like my big brother, my family.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's so cool. He's taught me a lot about leadership as well. There are literally too many to name off. There's just so many Black leaders that I look up to. I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by people who are supportive. Yeah.
Awesome.
And then, like, if you're thinking in terms of, like, disability work, there's, like, the Harriet Tubmans. There's literally all of Sins Invalid are doing really great work. Yeah. There's, like, Siobhan Niles from OCASI doing really great work, too. Lots of cool people.
Awesome. So, participants, now you've heard a few more names that you need to look up to and check out. Do your history work. So I'm just checking to see if we have any more questions here. I think we don't have any new questions, but I wanted to ask you, where can people learn more about the Disability Justice Network of Ontario?
Cool. We don't have an Instagram account, but now that I did this, I'm considering we should probably make one.
Yeah.
True. We have a Twitter, which is DJNO and then NTAIRO.
Okay.
So DJNO Ontario, but only with one O. And then our Facebook is the same. We have a website, www.djno.ca. And then I have like my own Twitter and stuff like that too. The best way to reach us would be over email, which you can find on our website. That gets a more immediate response. I'm trying to think of what else to say. Yeah, that's the best way to communicate.
Okay, awesome. I know we did have, so Mina Abdullahi.
Hi, Mina.
Can I get a shout out?
We went to school together. Okay, let me just real quick scroll through and see who to shout out on this. This Instagram thing is cool. I see Sarah Marino. She's a really dope lawyer. In Hamilton, does a lot of labor and activism rights. Gabby just came with us on a Queen's Park trip where we took 50 Black youth to Queen's Park the other day. What's up, Gabby? I'm trying to see. Mina, I went to school with. Really dope. There's Kathleen. Hasnain does a lot of like NDP organizing. Siobhan Niles from OCASI is on here too. Sai from NGS, what's up? Eric Gillis from... I did organizing with Eric during school. We're also doing organizing on the Hamilton Center, federal and NDP stuff. Hi, Eric. Lots of cool people.
Lots of cool people. And then I think that, so we have a shout out for RecFest. So Smile is organizing a carnival, an accessible carnival for children and youth and all ages on April 27th. And it's going to be in Downsview, I think at the Hangar. So if you want more information on that, it's on our Instagram and also on Facebook. So participants, put that in your calendar. And I think
we'll be there too.
Yes. And also, I know that you're going to be doing the Hancock lecture at the Hart House.
Yeah, so it got rescheduled. It was canceled due to snow. Literally, anytime I try to do something cool, it snows. Like, this is the theme.
The snow is just out here.
No, but I'm telling you, even on my birthday last year, April 14th, there was an ice storm. So it just follows me.
Wow.
But, yeah, so it got rescheduled to March 14th. There are tickets available because some people had to cancel coming when it got rescheduled. So if you're interested in coming to my Hancock lecture, please look it up. I don't remember the link, but you can just look up Hancock Lecture 2019.
Mhm.
I'll be going over the history of disability justice and like kind of a longer version of what I talked about today in terms of steps that we can take to build a world where people with disabilities are free to exist.
Awesome, awesome. I'm going to be there, inshallah. So
Okay, cool.
I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to your talk. So yeah, so if there are no other questions, I think maybe we can end off here. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and to, to talk more about, the work that you're doing, the awesome change making work that you're doing, and hearing about how we need to do more in our communities as well, to build a better society for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you
so much.
And stay warm in this cold, snowy weather.
I have my hat indoors.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Awesome. Okay. Bye, everyone.